before June 30th to obtain free licenses so that you're able to migrate customers that are presently not in the Microsoft 365 environment. So these would be customers who are at the moment with another platform for productivity, storage, or collaboration, or they could also just be still using their on-prem infrastructure and have not yet migrated to the Microsoft cloud. So this opportunity would give you free licenses that you could have access to in order to migrate these clients to the cloud. So you need to make this request, however, before June 30th. And once you receive the redeem code, you log into the BitTitan platform, their portal, and from there you're able to use these migration licenses. But you must do so before December 20th of this year. So you can click on the hyperlink as the deck with all the hyperlinks and all the slides are active. So you can directly click on those links that you see on the screen. Another thing that's going on at IT Cloud is we've set up a bookings link. That we've set up a bookings link for our specialists, and there are 10 different services available. And from there, you can book a meeting with one of us, myself included, with all the specialists. And that way, we're able to help you with any technical pre-sales questions and that you might have, so that we're definitely looking at the right product to make sure that it addresses your customers' needs and that we're all on the right track, because we certainly don't want you to, to go down the wrong path and acquire the wrong product for the wrong purpose. So that is the purpose of this bookings link. Another thing at IT Cloud is that we are on YouTube. We have our own YouTube channel. So this webinar, as of today, as well as other webinars, are on YouTube. So content that you used to find in the webinars tab in the partner portal at IT Cloud is now being made available on this YouTube channel. And on there, we have other webinars as well. We have our excellence program, whether we are referring to our Azure excellence program or whether we're talking about our uh, Microsoft Defender Business, Microsoft Business Premium, and Copilot the Excellence Program. So those series, both of those programs were delivered in two different presentations. So both of those presentations for either one of those programs are available on our IT Cloud YouTube channel. So let's go ahead with this webinar where we're going to talk about securing your customers with Microsoft Defender for Business. This presentation is really to illustrate to you, to show that there is an opportunity here for you partners to deliver this service, Defender for Business, to your customers. It is a way for you to increase your customers' needs for security so that you would be able to help elevate the level antivirus that is used on their workstations or their mobile devices. So this is to help you secure, provide additional security to those clients that are looking perhaps to increase their security posture. And as well, we're able to secure all these customers with ease from one platform because with these licenses, we are able to use Lighthouse to manage all the customers where you would onboard into Defender for Business. You would be able to manage all these customers and their devices within their respective tenants from Lighthouse. So this is obviously a growth revenue and option for you guys. And we talk about reducing operational costs, because the idea here is we have one simplified solution. And the idea is that you're able to manage this security for these clients right within their Microsoft 365 tenant. There is no need to log into an additional an additional platform to go and manage the entire virus for their devices in this case. And as we stated before, it could just be that these customers are presently not in Microsoft 365, whether they're using another provider for their productivity, collaboration, or storage, or they could just still be using our on-prem infrastructure. So this would be an opportunity for you to, integrate them into the Microsoft 365 environment. And additionally, later on down the road, you could also add other security solutions, or you could add the Microsoft 365 suite of applications as well. So let's look at the case where we presently have customers in 365 but who presently have business basic or business standard. So this would be an upsell motion for those clients where there are clients that want to increase their security, but are just not ready at the moment to go with Microsoft 365 Business Premium. So in that case, we could fall back on this solution of Defender for Business, which would still improve their security, just not the overall security of the tenant, but at least in this case, we could address additional security that we could provide on their devices. Well, let's look at a scenario where we could do this. You have a customer with Microsoft Business Basic or Standard who does not see the value of all the added security features that are provided within Business Premium, and also does not see the need of increasing the security of their tenant. But in this case, the customer is, well aware of what's going on with all malware, phishing, and spam, and really wants to increase the protection of the devices in regards to antivirus. So in this case, we could address this by deploying Microsoft Defender for Business. And what would be the benefit? Well, it would be that we would now have an increased security on these devices through the use of Microsoft Defender for Business. Another scenario would be where you have a customer, once again, that has is basic or standard, but wants to add antivirus protection to non-Windows devices. Because typically we're always talking about desktops, and most of the time we are referring to Windows devices. Well, in this case, we're also able, with Defender for Business, to deploy this to non-Windows devices. So know that it is possible to deploy this to, whether it's a customer that uses, Mac laptops using Mac OS, or it could be for mobile devices that are using iOS or Android. So let's look now at this scenario where we're not in the upsell, but we're more in acquisition mode, in the sense that we have customers that are not using the 365 cloud. They're using other solutions at the moment. So the idea with there, once again, would be ideally to lead with Microsoft Business Premium and all the added securities. But, sometimes it is just not in the cards. Those customers are not necessarily ready at the moment to move to 365. And we could just well, in that case, though, bring them in to the Microsoft 365 ecosystem by, telling them that we could increase the security on their desktops or workstations or mobile devices using Defender for Business. So let's look at a scenario where, like I mentioned before, we have a customer who is using other cloud services for their productivity, storage, or in collaboration. But that platform does not offer an enterprise level or, in actual fact, any antivirus solution in their product line. But the customer wants to increase their security posture so that their devices are less vulnerable to attacks. So in that case, we would deploy Microsoft Defender for Business to devices. And that would help us increase that protection using signals gathered from behavioral sensors that become active when Microsoft Defender for Business is deployed. Because what happens in an instance like that is when we deploy Defender for Business to devices, what happens is that all antivirus related activity that's happening on those devices, all those signals are captured and sent by telemetry to the cloud, the central cloud admin center for a Defender. Once again, customers using other cloud services for, storage and collaboration productivity, but has now decided to move with business basic or standard, but is still really not seeing the business value of business premium. Or do they feel that they need to increase the security, within their tenant? But they do realize that, it would be very good for them to increase the security on their devices. So once again, we would deploy Microsoft Defender for Business. As I was mentioning before, those signals are captured by those behavioral sensors, which are turned on in the case of a Windows machine. And then those signals are sent, that telemetry is sent to the Defender Admin Center in the cloud, where it is used for monitoring and analytics. Now let's look at another scenario, as we mentioned before, where we have an on-prem customer who is cloud averse and is still using, their on-prem system for the moment and is just not ready to move to the cloud, but would like to, go ahead with a better solution, for an antivirus solution for their devices. Well, in that case, we would go with Defender for Business. We would attach that to the existing on-prem solution and show them, what the benefits are. Or if we have that on-prem customer who is willing to move to the cloud. Once again, in that case, ideally, we would try to lead with business premium, but knowing that it's not everyone that's going to want to go this way. They might just, go the way of business basic or business standard. Well, in that case, we could upgrade the antivirus by, attaching to the deal, Defender for Business in this case. So let's look at some scenarios. Customer wants to elevate the level of protection of on-prem servers rather than continue to use Microsoft Defender antivirus. Well, it is possible as well in an on-prem situation, in this case, that we can as well deploy Defender for Business or the version that is appropriate for servers, in this case called Microsoft Defender for Service. So we are able to deploy this antivirus solution instead of using the base one, the Microsoft Defender antivirus that comes with the operating system. So in this case, we would be able to increase the protection for on-prem service, like I mentioned, above that of the Microsoft Defender antivirus with the protections of Microsoft Defender for servers. In another scenario, that the customer wants to elevate the level of protection of, in this case, the on-prem workstation and mobile devices, but is not ready to stop using their existing perpetual license version of the Office suite. They bought it many, many years ago and they're still using it. And for the time being, they're satisfied with it, they're happy with it, and they just don't see the benefit of moving to the cloud version of the Office suite of applications. Well, in this case, we would still be able to deploy Microsoft Defender for Business to their workstations and mobile devices, giving them that increased protection for all devices with Microsoft Defender for Business. Another scenario, customer is now no longer able to update their existing licensed perpetual version of the Office suite. So now they're going to move to the cloud, but in this case, they're not willing to go all the way with business premium, so they're going to go with business basic or standard. So, however, in this case, we can still offer them the protection of Microsoft Defender for Business for all of their workstations and devices. And then once again, we still benefit from that increased security on their devices because we are now using Microsoft Defender for Business. Now let's look at other scenarios where these scenarios that I'm going to show you next really fall within all of these three types of client, whether the two in acquisition mode or the one in upsell mode. Because in reality, it really doesn't matter where they are at now. We can still definitely provide more security by using Defender for Business. Now, we have a customer who wants to know if the present Microsoft Defender antivirus, which is the consumer-based version of the antivirus that comes with their Windows 10 operating system. They want to know if that antivirus is providing active protection because at the moment, there is no central dashboard to view or manage alerts in order to be able to know which devices are being or have been attacked by targets. Well, by deploying Microsoft Defender for Business to these Windows devices, we now have that visibility because, as I mentioned before, that telemetry, those sensors are employed or deployed and turned on, and then all those signals is sent through that telemetry through the Microsoft using Microsoft Defender for Business, which are all gathered, in the Defender Admin Center within the customer's 365 tenant. Another scenario, customer would like to be able to disable the use of a device that has an abnormal behavior to determine whether or not the change in behavior needs to be addressed while he conducts an investigation. This would be done in the case or let's say you install another application or an application gets updated and then the user notices from one day to the next that the machine seems a lot slower or things just are not happening smoothly or things don't flow the way they used to be and they just feel that the behavior of the machine is a little bit different. Well, in this case, instead of trying to figure it out locally on the machine, and in case there is an issue with the machine, in that case, we could isolate the machine. So by deploying Microsoft Defender for Business, we would be able to go through the Defender Admin Center and we would be able to isolate that machine from the network. Now, what happens when we isolate that machine from the network is that it is no longer able to communicate on the network, nor are any other machines or anything else able to communicate with it. The only means of communication that remain enabled is Defender in the cloud is able to talk to that machine and monitor and to see what it's going on. So we're able to figure out whether or not we need to apply any remediation or do we need to reimage that machine, reformat it for some reason or whatever. Or if we're able to come up with a solution, we can push the remediation down to the device. And once it it starts to behave normally, it satisfies, our criterias, then by all means, we can put it back as being active on the network. Another scenario is the customer does all of the required operating system updates on devices, but is wondering if this is enough or if something more could be done on a budget to increase their security posture. Well, in this case, once again, we would deploy Microsoft Defender for Business to workstation and mobile devices. And then once again, we would be able to increase, that protection of all those devices that are now running Defender for Business. Now, Defender for Business is built on the NIST cybersecurity framework. And that Microsoft used this framework in order to build their response, to build their system. So we have these four different levels of protection where we have, through identify, we got vulnerability management, protect, we've got our ASR or attack surface reduction, we've got next gen protection, detect and respond, where we have our EDR, our endpoint detection and response, and then where we have recover, where we're able, after we've automatically investigated and remediated the any alerts or any situations on the machine, we're able to put it back into production. All right, so we saw in the video at the end, it talks about Defender for Business being part of Business Premium, which it is. But if you noticed on the left side of the frame in that last screen, it also talked about the standalone version of Defender for Business. And that is more like, that is what we're looking at today. Here we have a representation of Microsoft Defender for Business and how it is able for us, you know, giving us the possibility of elevating the security of devices. So we see all those five different components, and then we talk about onboarding and API integration. So let's look at a little bit more in detail all of these aspects. Our vulnerability management helps us to effectively identify, assess, and remediate device weakness, which is really a pivotal function in order for us to be able to manage these devices and reduce organizational risk. So the function of the vulnerability management is it's able to discover these vulnerabilities and uh, device misconfigurations in real time without the need of agents or periodic scans. So it is really an ideal way to operate in the sense that we're not relying on another piece of software. It is really the antivirus itself with is able to, to monitor and gather all of this information and send it to our vulnerability management dashboard. So, like we said, continuous real-time discovery provides us with context-aware prioritization. Well, sorry about that. What that means is it lists all the things that could be done, but it lists them in an order that permits us to, to more rapidly lower the organizational risk. As we mentioned before, operating system misconfiguration, application misconfiguration. So it's able to really detect any potential risk that might exist on a device. And it identifies those risks and categorizes them and helps us, be more aware, being more proactive in lowering our risk. It's able to do so whether it's, it looks at the easiest, exploits possible or the hardest ones that are to discover. So it's really able to, work at all levels within the device itself, and it's able to detect all these vulnerabilities so that we are able to address those. Because ultimately, what we want to do is to make the device as secure as possible. Attack surface reduction for Windows. So what that helps us to do is, once again, through the dashboard, is we're able to see what is going on, within our device. And ideally, we want to reduce, our surface attack. So we can enable within that ASR, attack surface reduction, we can enable what's called application control. So what application control does is it helps us block malicious or untrusted applications from running on the devices. So we are able to create policies that would allow only trusted applications to run, which would definitely help us reduce our surface attack. And it also blocks these applications from starting child processes, which is typically done in some attacks. We would also be able to enable what is called controlled folder access. Now, what this does is it's really, a typical ransomware attack will start, and start writing, and locking files in all the folders on the device itself. Well, this feature will protect this, from happening by only allowing trusted applications to access protected folders. Now, what we mean by that is we would define an application and we would say that this application, we reserve it the right to go right in this specific folder and no one else. So in that way, we would be protecting files from being crypto locked. We could also do content filtering on our devices. So we would be able to set up rules that would, prevent, people from navigating on sites that would contain adult content in the sense that anything with explicit material, whether it be pornography or violence, we would be able to block these sites. Or there's another filter called legal liability. So any sites that are promoting illegal activity or would foster plagiarism. In that way, we'd be able to block these sites. We would be able to prevent people from surfing on these sites. We also have another one that's called uncategorized. So sites that are new, that have no content that is visible at the moment, or that are newly registered. They just haven't been on the internet long enough to develop a reputation score. Well, in that case, we would act on the more on the secure side. Why take a chance? We would just simply block that category of websites. And then we have our next generation protection. So the idea behind this is we would, even though we, enabled application control, we would still keep an eye out on our applications and how they're running, how they're behaving, what it is that they're doing within our devices. So the idea behind that is this is behavior-based real-time antivirus protection and includes always-on scanning using file and process behavior monitoring. Because the idea behind this is we want to add all of these multiple layers of security. Yes, we decided that we had a certain application. We decided that it was authorized, it's trusted, but it was authorized and trusted at the moment that we decided that it was authorized and trusted. But what about, later on in time, and for some reason, this application becomes corrupt. It starts, behaving in such a manner or doing things on the device that it should not be doing. So this is where our next generation protection kicks in, where it continues to monitor, these activities and includes detecting on blocking apps that are deemed unsafe and that might not necessarily be at that time, detected as malware because they haven't been known or declared to be malware. But because of the behavior, we would still be able to block these. And through this next generation protection, we have what is called dedicated protection and product updates, which is really useful because now we no longer have to wait for operating system updates in order for us to be able to update the antivirus portion running on our system. Defender now controls all antivirus updates. So if anything is new, any functionalities or anything security, relating wise to different behaviors to be detected, signatures, whatever the case may be, at that time, those are now controlled by Defender and updated by Defender. We also talk about fileless, protection because some malware does, come through as a fileless. It's not always necessarily, the attack doesn't always necessarily carry a payload. It's not always an attachment in an email. It's not always, content that gets downloaded from a website. There are attacks that exist in what is called fileless mode. So this Defender for Business is still able to protect us in this case because it has protection to address these issues. Our EDR, endpoint detection and response. Now, these give us capabilities for advanced attack detection and what Microsoft calls near real time and actionable. So, what happens here is security analysts can prioritize alerts effectively and gain visibility into the full scope of a breach, and then take specific actions to come and remediate this. But with this endpoint detection and response, we can choose to automate, and we also are able to aggregate all these alerts into incidents. It's just that it is it's easier for us humans to follow an attack, when you have alerts of the same nature. So what we would do at that point is Defender regroups them all into an incident and that we're able to track in this case, let's say the expansion, or how this attack, propagated itself through the environment. And through automatic attack disruption, we can then take decisions as well manually, or we can let the system, automatically disrupt these attacks because that possibility exists in Defender for Business. Now, this functionality at one time was only reserved for anyone that had a Microsoft 365 E5 license. But now this capability exists within Defender for Business, both as a standalone or when it comes bundled within Defender Business Premium. So let's look at a little demo on how this disruption, attack happens automatically, and we're able to remediate this attack automatically. So here we have the attacker machine, and we have the little label here, not onboarded. What that means is that this computer, this device at this moment, is not onboarded into Defender in the cloud. So therefore, Defender itself is not aware of this machine, does not know what is happening on this machine. What happens though is the attacker, has compromised this machine, so logs in with compromised credentials. It uses Alice's credential, and from there creates another set of credentials on this machine called Bob. So what the attacker does is it connects with Alice's credentials via remote desktop protocol, RDP, to go and drop a payload onto a machine. But this is not acceptable behavior. So Defender automatically detected the activity and terminated the session. And therefore, Alice is incriminated and contained. In other words, the attack that was launched by Alice, even though we all know it really wasn't truly Alice, it was the attacker, that had used the compromised credentials of Alice to launch this attack. Well, Defender is able to block that automatically. So our attacker, after failing on step one, decides to use Alice's credential again, but this time to try to remote encrypt over SMB, try to open a connection once again using another method on that machine to go and drop the payload. But once again, Alice's activity is blocked, and therefore the attacker is contained because Defender remembers that these credentials were used in another attack previously. So now it's keeping a watchful eye that anything relative to Alice's credential being used to connect to another machine, it looks at that in a suspicious way. And then we have once again, this time our attacker decides to use Bob's credential. And once again, this time is not going to try the RDP to drop the payload, it's going to go right away to that remote encrypt over SMB. Well, in this case, once again, that type of attack was blocked before. So once again, when Defender sees a remote encrypt over SMB connection trying to be established, automatically it stops that attack. And that way, that lateral movement within the network, within the organization is stopped. So in that sense, they are not able to access as well all those other onboarded machines. Now, as I mentioned before, we have incidents. So in our dashboard, what do incidents do? They narrate the end-to-end attack story. So the idea behind that is we gather all of these alerts and we group them inside of an incident. And that way we're able to follow the story of this attack. Where did it happen? Which machine was targeted first? How was it targeted? And from there, was that machine, that initial targeted machine, was that machine used, to go and target other machines? Or was that alert, that incident that generated that alert, was that attack used on another machine to try and compromise another machine? So in this way, we're really able to see, what happened over time in our environment, and we're able to gain more insights into what happened. We also have live response for anyone of, those of you who would prefer to connect directly to a machine instead of using the graphical user interface, the GUI. Well, you're able to remotely, connect live into a machine that is running Defender for Business. So what you're able to do at that point is go yourself and retrieve that information from those behavioral sensors. And ultimately, what you could do is you could decide to build, your own set of commands. You could decide to build your own tool, to come and remediate, certain alerts or incidents. And as well, you could share those tools, on the Git repo. But I think the most important thing is on the Git repo is if you yourself are able to share, some of these tools that you've developed to respond to, attacks on devices. I would pretty sure that other people as well have contributed. So therefore, you could gain some insights as well on some other type of attacks and how to remediate them, by using maybe some tools that somebody else developed over time. Threat analytics. This is very interesting in that it gives us our view in regards to threats at the moment. Before we talked to initially about vulnerability management, which painted a picture of risks and potential threats, but threat analytics paints us a picture of the actual threats going on at the moment in the environment and the response and how we responded to those threats. So that's why we call it a threat to posture view. In other words, maybe it is because we didn't address an issue that we saw in our vulnerability management, risk assessment, but now that has turned into an actual full-fledged attack. So once we remediate this attack, perhaps we should think about going, back to our posture, going back to our vulnerability management report, and start addressing some issues. AIR, automated investigation and remediation. You'll find in some Microsoft documentation that sometimes instead of the word remediation, you'll find the word response. It's just they're interchangeable, one or the other. They actually mean the same thing. So what this does for us is a technology that's using automated investigation, which uses, various inspection algorithm and is based on processes that are used by security analysts. So AIR's capabilities are designed to examine alerts and take immediate action to resolve breaches. So the idea behind that is yes, we could choose, to manually intervene on these attacks, but from an alert, we can actually ourselves decide, what action is appropriate when we see that type of attack. And in that way, we would now be able to remediate automatically to some of these alerts and threats that are detected in the system. So what is Defender for Business with AIR? So security automation is mimicking the ideal steps a human would take to investigate and remediate a cyber threat. It is not, security automation is not if a machine has an alert to just simply automatically isolate it. So the idea behind that is to look at the steps an analyst is taking when investigating or remediating threats and to identify, the next following high level steps that need to happen in order to contain the threat or the attack. So determining whether the threat requires action, performing necessary remediation actions, deciding what additional investigations should be next, and repeating this as many times as it is necessary for every alert. So the idea is to have this active protection running all the time and not just wait till an analyst comes and looks at the alerts and decides, whether or not, these alerts should be acted upon. Simplified onboarding and administration. This is very interesting because there are different ways of deploying Defender for Business, but in our case, because we are in a standalone environment where we're only purchasing Defender for Business, we're not able to use Intune in this case to deploy Defender for Business. If we had Business Premium, which comes with Intune, we could then use Intune to automatically deploy Defender for Business. But in this case, we're going to manually have to deploy it ourselves because there is no automation that can be done. So what we do in that case is we go and search and pick out our operating system that we want to onboard, and we go and choose the operating system in question. And from there, we choose the deployment method. And in this case, we would choose local script. So what that'll do is it'll download a PowerShell script, which we can then execute on the endpoints, on the devices themselves, in order to onboard them into Defender for Endpoint, or in this case, Defender for Business. Now, lower a bit further down in this screen, we would also see that there exists another script which we can use just to validate whether or not, the response, the Defender for Business response is actually working, and if the telemetry is actually working as well. Because what happens when we execute this script, it initiates a process, an action on the machine, which will generate an alert, which will get picked up by those behavioral sensors. and it'll get sent by the telemetry through the cloud console of Defender. And in there, we'll be able to immediately see an alert that was generated by the device. We use that as a confirmation, just to make sure that the antivirus is really up and running and that everything is good. And then we also have here an offboarding script. If for some reason you choose not to use Defender for Business anymore as your antivirus solution, you choose to fall back on the default one, or you decide to move to another platform, well, you can offboard your devices from the Defender portal, and you can, bring that behavior of antivirus on your device to back to its original configuration. We also have monthly security summary, which are very interesting because we'd be able to quickly share security insights, with stakeholders in a simple format. So the idea behind that, I mean, it's yes, it is for stakeholders. At the end of the day, we are all stakeholders in the customer's security journey. But in this case, you could share with the customer themselves this report, to show them, where you've come from, what has been done this month, what security issues were addressed. But in actual fact, the report also shows you, all the security incidents that happen, within their environment and how they were handled. So it's another way for you to show the customer that, this solution is working and it is there to help improve security for them. APIs and integration. It is possible as well to connect external platforms to Defender for Business to come and retrieve all that data that is generated by those behavioral sensors. So we could use another platform to monitor, to gather all that data and do analytics from, if we so choose. Now, it is possible to integrate that with data RMM, for example. So remember, it is possible that that you have a customer, which at the moment, um, maybe they're in the cloud, maybe they're not in the cloud, but you choose to deploy Defender for Business, but they also have, other solutions that they use, to monitor and manage the devices for this customer. So you would be able in this case to integrate all those signals gathered from Defender for Business into data RMM. You could even choose to develop, to build your own SOC because, like I said before, through the use of those APIs, we're able to, go and connect and to retrieve all that information, all that data that is provided by those behavioral sensors, so that you could choose to analyze that, on an external platform that you end up building yourself for all your clients if you so choose. But it could also be integrated, as shown here, with Blackpoint or ConnectWise. So there are other ways to look at the data that is gathered from those sensors, and you could, use other means to analyze that if you choose not to use the Defender Admin Center in the cloud, that becomes enabled when you deploy Defender for Business. So as we mentioned before, we're really able to deliver, device security across platforms because we talked about our Windows machines. We did talk about servers, but we can also do Linux. So, which is very handy. This is relatively new, perhaps a year or so, I believe, so that we're now able to deploy Defender for Business to Linux machines. And we already talked about before Mac OS machines. So anyone that has, MacBooks, MacBook Airs, MacBook Pros, iMacs, whatever the case may be, they're also able to use Defender for Business. We already talked about how, to deploy and use Defender for Business on our mobile devices. But what about virtual desktops? Very popular. So we are as well able to use Defender for Business in Azure virtual desktop machines and in Windows 365 machines as well. If we really wanted to completely protect, our complete, are all our devices, all our hardware, no matter what at which level it is, whether it's in the office, it's a workstation, whether it's servers in the server room, or whether they're actual virtual machines in the cloud. Well, we're able in all of these cases to add additional protection and deploy Defender for Business to all of these devices. As we mentioned before, Defender for Business servers is available. The way we were looking at it before on Windows 10 machines, let's say, for example, it's a Defender for Business, which in that case is a license. But when we talk Defender for Business on servers, it is an add-on. And then once again, we talk, that it is an add-on for Windows servers as well as Linux servers. And it adds protection, to Defender for Business or Microsoft 365 Business Premium, because in this case, we would, layer that on top. And what I forgot to mention as well is I went a little too quick is this Lighthouse integration. With Defender for Business, we have an added advantage in that we are now able to use Lighthouse to see what is happening security-wise on these devices from all of these customer tenants. Because from within Lighthouse, we can connect all our customer tenants to one central Lighthouse instance, and we're able to see everything that is going on in that case. So, which makes it very interesting to have a view from a single point of glass or single pane of glass, I should say. And we already talked about simplified mobile threat defense that we're able to secure iOS. We're able to secure as well Android devices. And we're able to do that without device management, meaning we don't need to use Intune, let's say in this case, in order to deploy or keep an eye out or, push it down to these devices. We're able to do that directly, which is very handy because all we do at that point is from within those devices, you go to the respective app store, whether it's Google Play Store or the Apple Store, and you go and download the application and you log in with your 365 credentials, with that license that's deployed in the tenant, and boom, that device from that point on is secured using Defender for Business. And we already talked about some of the features that we can find within this detailed mobile threat defense, like I mentioned, without device management, which is very handy. But of course, we're not able to give all the full protection because if we had Intune capacity, a capability, I mean, we would be able to do additional things which we can't do because we're not using Intune. Now we can have a mixed licensing with Defender for Business. Now it is possible that you might encounter some customers that already have, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, whether it be, in Plan 1 or Plan 2. Now, what happens in the case if you deploy Microsoft Defender for Business in these tenants? Everyone from that point on, even though they have, a certain number of Microsoft Defender for Endpoint Plan 1 license, just the fact of deploying Microsoft Defender for Business licenses in the tenant means at that point that the experience or that the security behind that, the features are all going to be at the level of Defender for Business. So in order for that whole environment to have all the possibilities, let's say, of Defender for Endpoint P1, then all the licenses for antivirus for all the devices, they all have to be of the same at the same level or of the same nature. Here we have a detailed product comparison. We're often asked that, like, well, how does Microsoft Defender for Business compare with Microsoft Defender for Endpoint Plan 1 or Plan 2? Well, here we can clearly see, what features are available with Defender for Business. And we always tell partners that Defender for Business actually offers more capabilities than Defender for Endpoint. And here we're actually, in fact, able to see, this offering that, yes, it is true. Defender for Business does give us more than Defender for Endpoint. And here we have a second list of capabilities, of possibilities that Defender for Business is able to deliver for us. Here we have some resources. You could click on those now, as I mentioned, because those links are live. So you could go to those sites right away if you want, or like I mentioned before, this webinar will be made available later on as well. So you st would still have access to this content at a later date. But as far as I'm concerned at this moment, this I have reached the end of the presentation. So I would really like to thank you for joining us today. It was really nice to have you and have you guys participate in this webinar. And I hope, that you definitely, consider deploying Defender for Business to your customers. And as usual, we would really like it if you could just take maybe a minute or two of your time and give us an evaluation on this webinar, because we're always trying to improve, the way we deliver these webinars. We're also trying to improve on the content. We want to make sure that the content that we're delivering to you guys is pertinent and that it's useful and that it's, you can use it in everyday scenarios, with your customers. And that's our goal at the end of the day is for you to help your customers. If your customers win, you win, and we win. Any questions in the chat? It looks pretty quiet in the chat at the moment. All right. Well, thank you. All right. Thank you, guys. And like I said, we're really happy that you could join us today. We really do appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. And we'll definitely, keep putting out some of these webinars, showing some of the different functionalities of the different products, because at the end of the day, we really want you to, implement these solutions because we truly believe that they do make a positive difference for your customers. So thank you. We'll see you next time.